Antiseptic doesn't smell like clean. It smells like something trying very hard to be clean, like it's covering something worse underneath. You learn to separate the layers after a while. Underneath the bleach at Lakewood General, there's always the copper-sweet edge of blood, the sour undertow of infection, and something else I'd spent 3 years trying to forget. Burnt cordite. It's not there. I know it's not there. But some nights, around hour 9 of a 12-hour shift, when the fluorescent lights start doing that thing where they hum instead of buzz, a low, grinding frequency that drills straight behind your eyes, my nose starts lying to me, and I'm back in places that don't have names on any map you'd find in a classroom. I press 3 fingers against the radial artery of the man in Bay 2. Mr. Delgado, 71, chest pain, mild diaphoresis, elevated troponin pending. His skin was papery and cool, and his pulse had the shallow, irregular quality of a heart, deciding whether it still wanted to be in the game. I counted. I didn't look at the monitor. The monitor could wait. Your fingers don't lie. Sandra's voice hit me before she did. She had a way of entering a room that made every molecule of air feel like it was bracing for impact. Webb. The voice came from the doorway, clipped and flat, like she was reading my name off a list of things she'd rather not deal with. Bay 2 is a holding case. Dr. Park is managing. I need the supply carts on the North Hall restocked. Sutures, gauze, the full trauma setup. Someone pulled half the inventory during last night's shift and didn't log it. She paused. That's your kind of work. I kept my fingers on Mr. Delgado's wrist. His pulse stuttered, compensated, steadied. His rhythm is irregular, Sandra. I said it quietly. I always said everything quietly. Could be AFib with RVR. Somebody should pull a 12 lead. Sandra stepped fully into the room. She was a large woman with the bearing of someone who had spent decades winning arguments she should have lost. Her scrubs were always immaculate. She held her clipboard like a shield and a weapon simultaneously. Dr. Park ordered the 12 lead 15 minutes ago. It's in the queue. You're not the attending, Webb. You're not even assigned to this bay. Now the supply carts. North Hall. Please. She said please, the way some people say the word that comes before a threat. I set Mr. Delgado's wrist down gently. I patted the back of his hand once. He gave me the look that old men give you when they're scared, and they don't want you to see it. I saw it. I always saw it. I'll be back to check on you, I told him, not loudly enough for Sandra to hear it as a challenge. The North Hall smelled like floor wax and the ghost of someone's microwaved lunch. I started pulling supply drawers, counting gauze packages, separating the suture sizes. 20, 30, 40. Absorbable, non-absorbable. It was the kind of work you could do with your hands while your mind went somewhere else entirely, which was exactly why I liked it. 3 years, 2 months, and 11 days. That's how long I'd been at Lakewood General. That's how long I'd been Marcus Webb, night shift ER nurse. Not Eagle 1, not the primary combat medic for Charlie Company, 1st Battalion, 75th Ranger Regiment. Not the man who had run 200 meters through active contact in the Arghandab River Valley to pull a 19-year-old private back from the edge of a wound that should have killed him inside of 4 minutes. Just Marcus Webb, just the male nurse. You're going too slow again, Webb. Dr. Kevin Park appeared at the end of the hallway, his white coat still too big in the shoulders, his lanyard spinning nervously around his index finger. He was 28 years old and had the specific brand of anxiety that comes from being smart enough to know how much you don't know, but not experienced enough to manage that fear quietly. Holloway's doing rounds in an hour, and the board is a mess. 12 lead in Bay 2 needs to be read, I said, not looking up from the cart. Delgado, check his rhythm before you do anything else. Park blinked. I know. I ordered it. It's been 20 minutes. He stopped, recalibrated. Fine, Park said, and disappeared back down the hall. I finished the north cart, started the east cart. Dr. Patricia Holloway found me 40 minutes later. She didn't find me so much as walk past me twice and look at me each time as though I were a piece of furniture that had been placed incorrectly. Patricia Holloway was 61 years old and had spent 30 of those years building a career she wore like body armor. Chief of surgery at Lakewood General for 12 years. She had the handshake of someone who had been underestimated so many times that the handshake had become a correction. I understood that. I respected it. It didn't make her easier to work with. Webb. She stopped on the second pass. What are you doing on the East Hall? Sandra put you on supply. Supplies done. I held up the clipboard. I also flagged a possible medication interaction in Bay 7. The patient in 7B is on warfarin, and someone ordered ibuprofen for her hip pain. Different attending, different shift. Nobody caught it. Holloway took the clipboard. She looked at the notation. She handed it back. Her expression did not change in a way you could describe precisely, but something behind her eyes made a small adjustment. I'll have pharmacy pull it, she said. When you're done on East, there's a patient in the waiting room who's been there 4 hours, probably dehydration. Get him into the observation bay and start a liter of saline. The attending will get to him when they get to him. She was already moving. The conversation was over before I could confirm the order. Dehydration. Got it. Because I needed a medical degree to start a fluid line, because that was the ceiling of what I was trusted to do. I watched her walk down the hallway, and I did what I always did. I put it back in the box where Eagle One lived, the box where the Arghandab Valley lived, and Kandahar, and Logar Province, and every jagged, sun-blasted piece of terrain I'd crossed with a trauma kit and a rifle, and men who called me Doc, even when they outranked me by half a dozen grades. It was 1,400 hours when I felt it. I wasn't standing. I was crouched by the baseboard of the triage corridor, picking up a dropped IV cap that someone had kicked under the supply rack. The linoleum was cold under my knee. The hospital had 27 ambient sounds that I had cataloged without meaning to in my first 6 weeks on the job. The elevator on the west wing, the particular rattle of the crash cart wheels, the way the vending machine in the break room cycled its compressor every 40 minutes. What I felt was number 28, and it didn't belong. It started in the soles of my shoes, a low-frequency vibration that came up through the concrete subfloor, not the building settling. Not the HVAC kicking on. This was rhythmic, deliberate, a heavy syncopated thudding that bypassed your ears entirely and went straight for your sternum. I stood up slowly. Around me, the ER went on with its oblivious afternoon. Sandra was on the phone at the charge desk. Dr. Park was arguing with a lab tech over a blood result. 2 nurses were debating what to order for dinner. The monitors beeped their meaningless chorus. Nobody else felt it. Nobody else had learned how. I pressed my back against the wall. I put my hands in my pockets, and I stood very still, the way you stand still when you're not sure yet whether to move toward something or away from it. The vibration intensified, climbing the walls now, making the loose ceiling tile above the supply closet rattle in its frame. Not 1 bird, 2, maybe 3. Too heavy for civilian medevac. The rhythm was military. Those engines were military. The red phone at the charge desk rang. The red phone never rang. It had rung twice in the last 3 years. Once for a bus accident on Route 9. Once for a propane explosion at a distribution facility. Both times it had cleared the room in under 30 seconds. Sandra stared at it for 3 full seconds before she picked it up. Her face did a thing in the space of those 3 seconds that I recognized. She went from irritated to confused to frightened without passing through anything in between. Lakewood General, charge desk. She stopped. She listened. Her clipboard lowered slowly to her side. You can't. We're not a Trauma 1 facility. We don't have the surgical backup for a... She stopped again. How many, what kind of... Another pause. Longer this time. You're already on the ground. She put the phone down, not hung up, just set it on the desk gently, the way you set something down when your hands have stopped trusting themselves. Code yellow, she said, to no one, to everyone. Code yellow, everybody. Clear the trauma bays. We have incoming military. Her voice was gaining volume as the words landed. They're in the parking lot. They're not landing on the roof. They're in the parking lot. The ER split open. It happens fast in mass casualty prep. You've either drilled for it enough that the motion is automatic, or you haven't, and you flail. Lakewood General had drilled. The motion was there. But underneath the motion was something that isn't in any drill manual. A specific, constricting species of panic that only happens when the threat is undefined. Sandra pointed at me without looking at me. Webb, stand against the wall. Don't touch anything in the trauma bays. I moved to the wall. I stood with my back flat against the cool plaster, my arms at my sides, the same posture I'd held in 4 different combat outposts while waiting for a situation to resolve itself or explode. My heart rate was 49 beats per minute. I knew because I could feel it. The ambulance bay doors didn't open. They were removed. Not literally, but 4 men hit them with enough coordinated force that the hydraulic assist was irrelevant, and they swung back so hard they cracked against the outer wall and stayed there. The noise was a gunshot concussion, and half the ER staff flinched. The smell came in with them. Jet fuel, copper, and the particular hot iron stench of blood that has been burning against a warm body for too long. It rolled over the bleach and the antiseptic and filled the room with something ancient and honest and terrible. The men who came through were not paramedics. They wore plate carriers and desert tan fatigues marked with nothing civilian and everything I recognized. The lead man was massive, 6'3" at minimum, with a jaw like poured concrete and eyes that had been doing threat assessment on the room since before the doors finished moving. He was carrying one end of a Skedco litter. The others flanked it, moving in the practiced geometry of men who had done this in complete darkness, in active contact, in weather that would have shut down this city for a week. On the litter was Sergeant Major Diego Torres. I didn't know it was Torres yet. I couldn't see his face from where I was standing. I saw the uniform, shredded down the left side from some kind of fragmentation event. I saw the field tourniquet on his right thigh, cranked so tight it had already started cutting into the muscle. I saw the improvised chest seal on his left side, a piece of polymer film pressed over a wound that was doing its job inadequately. And I heard his breathing. That was the thing. You could hear his breathing from across the room. It was a wet, stuttering sound, like a drain struggling to keep up with the flow. Tension pneumothorax, developing. He was 3 to 5 minutes from tracheal deviation and cardiovascular collapse. I knew this. I was standing against the wall with my hands in my pockets because Sandra had told me not to touch anything. Dr. Holloway stepped forward. Whatever she was or wasn't in the ordinary hours of the day, she stepped forward when it mattered, and I noted that. "I'm the chief of surgery at this facility," she said, addressing the lead operator directly. "We can get your man into Trauma Bay 1, but I need to know what we're dealing with. What happened?" The lead operator set the litter down on the nearest gurney and looked at Holloway with the specific expression of a man deciding in real time how much this civilian was going to be useful. "Fragmentation event," he said. His voice was a controlled rumble, each word deliberate. "Left hemothorax, partial. Field seal is failing. Right femoral tourniquet, applied 38 minutes ago. He's been in and out for the last 20. What have you got for thoracic?" "We can open a chest," Holloway said. "I'll need a few minutes to prep." "He doesn't have a few minutes." The operator said it flatly, not unkindly, simply as a fact that had stopped being negotiable somewhere over the interstate. Dr. Park appeared at the edge of the bay. He looked at the men, at the litter, at the tourniquet, and his face went through a process of information uptake that his training hadn't fully equipped him for. He grabbed a laryngoscope from the nearest cart. "I can intubate." The operator to the right, shorter than the lead but built like the concept of density made human, put a hand flat on Park's chest. "Stand down." He wasn't asking. "Your hands are shaking." Park looked down. His hands were shaking. "Where is your trauma lead?" The lead operator's gaze moved across the assembled staff with a patience that was somehow more frightening than urgency. Sandra stepped forward. Our attending physician is... Not the attending. The operator scanned the room slowly, left to right, checking faces, checking corners. Where is Eagle 1? The room went so quiet I could hear the chest seal failing. I could hear the particular change in Torres's breathing that meant the pressure in his left hemithorax was building toward critical. I had maybe 90 seconds before his trachea shifted and his blood pressure collapsed to nothing. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. To the staff of Lakewood General, Eagle 1 was a sequence of syllables that meant nothing. To them, I was Marcus. I was the supply cart. I was the man who flagged the warfarin interaction and was thanked with a bag of saline. Eagle 1. The lead operator said it louder. Not desperate. Final. Soak 1st of the 75th. Dispatch tracked his license to this facility. Where is he? On the litter. Torres's lips were going blue. I pushed off the wall. I didn't decide to. The decision had already been made somewhere below the level of language, in the part of me that Sandra had never reached with her clipboards and her assignments, in the part of me that knew exactly how much time Diego Torres had left and was not willing to spend it standing against a wall. My shoes didn't squeak. They always squeaked. Maybe I just stopped hearing everything except what mattered. I walked past Sandra. I walked past Park. I walked directly to the lead operator and stopped close enough that he had to look down to find my face. He looked down. He looked at me. The fury in his eyes fractured along a hairline crack, and something else showed through it, something that looked almost like relief. "Move," I said. He moved. I looked down at the man on the litter, and I saw the name tape, Torres. Something cold and enormous passed through my chest, and I put it in the box along with everything else, because Diego Torres was alive and I intended to keep him that way. I need a 14-gauge angiocath, a 10-blade scalpel, and a chest tube tray. I said it to the room, the way you say things when you know they're going to get done. Skip the betadine. Time matters more than sterility right now. The tourniquet on the right leg has been on 38 minutes. I need a fresh one and a junctional clamp standing by. We'll change it the moment his airway is sorted. Holloway hadn't moved. She was looking at me with an expression I didn't have time to read. "Webb," she started. "You're not." I pulled up my left sleeve. Not all the way, just to the elbow, just enough. There are places on the human body that hold stories. The inside of my left forearm is one of them. The tattoo there isn't decorative. It never was. It's a ranger scroll, the curved black lettering and specific geometry of the 75th Regiment's unit identifier. The kind of thing that gets put on skin instead of paper, because paper burns and skin is what you have when everything else is gone. Beneath it, in smaller lettering, the designation that Holloway couldn't have read from where she stood, but that the lead operator read from 10 feet with his eyes half closed. Eagle 1. Swam.175 RGR. The lead operator stopped breathing for approximately 1 second. Then he straightened, and in the middle of a civilian emergency room, in a mid-sized hospital in a city that had never heard a shot fired in anger, Major James Reeves, United States Army, 75th Ranger Regiment, came to attention, heels together, chin level, right hand raised in a salute that was crisp enough to cut glass. Behind him, in a ripple that spread through the team like something electrical, every man in that room did the same. Sandra made a sound. I don't know what kind. I wasn't looking at her. "Materials," I said, to whoever was going to move first. "Now." Park moved. He moved like a man who has just understood that the room has been rearranged around him in a way he didn't see coming. When someone takes command in a way that is absolute and physical and unmistakable, your own panic has somewhere to go. It offloads. That's what command is for. I pulled on gloves. I located the second intercostal space, right side mid-clavicular line. Torres's chest was drum tight. The skin pulled over his ribs like it was trying to escape through his sternum. I pressed the 14-gauge angiocath against the entry point. I didn't warn him. He was unconscious. Warning was for people who could hear it. I drove the needle in. The pop was small and precise, and then the hiss, a controlled, pressurized exhalation from a chest cavity that had been building since whatever had happened to Torres in whatever place had no name on any map. I watched his trachea, watched it, visible against the skin of his neck, for the deviation that means the heart is being pushed away from where it belongs. And I watched it, slowly, grudgingly, over the space of about 8 seconds, begin to center. "O2 sats," I said. 81. Reeves read from beside the monitor, the way a soldier reads a coordinate. 84. Rising. Temporary. I needed the chest tube in before his lung sealed itself against the catheter, and I lost the access. Scalpel. Park handed it to me handle first, which is the correct way to hand a scalpel, and I noted that he had learned something important in the last 3 minutes, even if he didn't know what it was yet. I found the 5th intercostal space, made the incision. The blood came up dark and immediate, the way it does when a space that isn't supposed to have blood in it suddenly has to give it back. I dropped the scalpel, took the Kelly forceps Park was already holding out. Already, he was anticipating now, his panic converted into function, and spread the muscle. Spread it further. Torres's body registered the intrusion with a single deep-chested groan that vibrated through the gurney, but Reeves and another operator had their hands on his shoulders before the movement could become a problem. My finger went into the pleural space. Hot, tight. Clotted edges at the wound margin that needed to be swept clear. I did it fast because fast was what the situation required, and I had done this in the back of a medevac helicopter while the pilot was taking evasive action, and I had still done it cleanly. I did it cleanly now. Tube. Reeves handed it to me before Park could get there. He knew what a 36 French chest tube looked like. He had seen more of them than any person should. I guided it in, posterior and superior, feeding it into the pleural space until I felt the resistance that meant it was seated correctly. Dark blood, hemothorax, the accumulation from the fragmentation wound, rushed through the clear plastic tubing in a grim, immediate cascade that hit the collection canister with a sound that made 2 nurses in the doorway step backward involuntarily. "Connect him to suction," I told Park, "and get me a fresh tourniquet for that leg. The one he's carrying is past time." Park scrambled. Holloway appeared at my elbow. She wasn't speaking. She was watching with her hands clasped in front of her, the way surgeons watch when they're reassessing something they thought they understood. I changed the tourniquet. The original had done its job. Torres still had his leg, but another 15 minutes at that tension, and the neurovascular structures beneath it would start making permanent decisions. I applied the replacement, cranked it clean, noted the time on the strip, reset the clock. I stepped back. The monitor was beeping, not the frantic, arrhythmic protest of a body in crisis, the steady, deliberate signature of a body that has decided to stay. 97. O2 at 97. Heart rate still rapid but organized. Blood pressure 68/40 and building. "He's stable," I said. My voice was flat. It had the flatness of something working very hard not to be anything else. "He needs OR access within the hour. That chest tube is managing the hemothorax, but there's active bleeding behind the seal that has to be addressed surgically. The leg is holding. Keep him positioned and don't let that tube kink." I stripped the gloves. Let them fall into the biohazard bin with a soft, hollow thack. My hands underneath were shaking, not visibly, just at some frequency you could only detect if you were the one they belonged to. Holloway looked at me the way she had never looked at me in 3 years, 2 months, and 11 days. Webb, her voice had changed registers. I hadn't heard that particular register from her before. "You need to get him upstairs," I said. "Trauma surgery, 3rd floor, OR. Call ahead. Tell them hemothorax with chest tube in situ. Tourniquet right femoral. Approximate injury time 90 minutes. They'll know what to do. I turned to the computer station. I'll write the field notes. You'll need them for the handoff. Major James Reeves stepped in front of me. He was a large man, and he was close. And looking up at him in the harsh fluorescent light of Lakewood General's trauma bay, I saw the exhaustion on his face that gets there after something goes wrong and then, by some narrow, impossible margin, goes right. "Eagle 1, he said. "Quiet, just the two of us in a room full of people." "That's not my name," I said. "Not here. Torres is alive because of you." He looked at the man on the gurney, being prepped now by Holloway's team for the elevator and the OR above. "Same as Alvarez. Same as Okafor. Same as the 12 men you brought back from the Argandab that nobody was supposed to know about." He paused. "We've been looking for you for 2 years." "I wasn't hiding," I said. I said it like I believed it. Reeves looked at me. He didn't argue. He reached into a small utility pouch on his plate carrier, the kind of pocket where people keep the things they aren't going to lose, and he placed something on the edge of the supply cart. A patch. The 75th Ranger Regiment scroll. Subdued, black border for combat deployment. The fabric was stiff with old dust, and the edges were beginning to fray. He didn't say anything, he just put it there. Then he stepped back and rejoined his men. Their movements were efficient and silent. They were very good at leaving places. Rangers usually were. I stood at the supply cart for a long time after the elevator doors closed behind Torres and the team escorting him. The ER moved around me, the way it always moves. The beeping and the footsteps, and Sandra's voice already on the phone giving somebody an account of what had just happened. Dr. Park was at the computer station, trying to chart something and visibly struggling with how to categorize it. Holloway came to stand beside me. She looked at the patch. "Where?" she said. "One word. Afghanistan," I said. "Mostly." She was quiet for a moment, the kind of quiet that isn't empty. "The warfarin flag in Bay 7, she said finally. "You caught that?" "Yes." "And Delgado's rhythm this morning. You flagged it before Park ran the 12 lead." It was there to notice. She picked up the patch from the edge of the cart. She held it for a moment, her thumb moving across the embroidered lettering. She set it back down, exactly where it had been. "The West Hall supply carts still need the trauma setup restocked," she said. Her voice was professionally neutral, in a way that had something careful and deliberate behind it. "After you finish charting," she walked away. Her shoes hit the linoleum in their usual measured rhythm. Nothing about her posture had changed, but she didn't look back the way she usually didn't look back, and somehow it felt different this time. I picked up the patch. It weighed nothing. It weighed everything. I folded it twice and put it in the pocket of my scrubs, next to the pen clipped there and the piece of tape I always had ready. The Blackhawks were gone. The parking lot outside the ambulance bay windows was empty, except for a scatter of downed leaves from the rotor wash and one overturned traffic cone that nobody had gotten around to standing back up. The vibration had left the floors. The fluorescent lights had resumed their usual hum. I sat down at the charting terminal. I pulled up the intake form. Patient name, Torres Diego. Presenting complaint. I stopped. I thought about a dark stretch of road in the Argandab River Valley at 0340 hours, where the air tasted like pulverized concrete, and Diego Torres had kept me talking while I worked on his leg. That was what Diego did. He talked while everyone around him was bleeding. A steady, calm stream of words about his daughter and the restaurant his mother ran in San Antonio and what he was going to order the day he got back. He talked until I got the bleeding stopped. He never stopped. I thought about how quiet he had been on that litter. I put my hands on the keyboard. I started charting. The West Hall carts weren't going to restock themselves. It was going to be a long shift. It was always a long shift. And when it was over, I would drive home in the dark and sit in my car for exactly as long as it took for my hands to stop doing the thing they were doing now, and then I would go inside. Tomorrow night, I would come back. I would pour the terrible coffee. I would check the vitals. I would stock the carts and flag the drug interactions and do every quiet, invisible thing that keeps a hospital running in the hours when nobody is watching. I was just the male nurse. I had always been just the male nurse. And in the places where it mattered, in the language spoken between people who had bled in the same dirt and watched the same helicopters come and go, that had always been enough. If Marcus's story left you holding your breath, hit that like button and share this with someone who needs to be reminded that the most powerful people in any room aren't always the ones making the most noise. Subscribe to The Last Nurse for more stories about the men and women who carry their service in silence long after the uniform comes off. Drop a comment below. When Torres wakes up in that OR, what's the first thing he says to the man who saved his life? Again.